A former Marine and retired law enforcement officer is now convicted of murder. Why on earth did Daniel Howard murder his wife? Was it anger, jealousy, or greed? Let's look at the sentencing and how these narcissistic predators try to convince us that they are something entirely different than we've come to know.
And you were getting divorced. I don't pretend that would be easy to go through. But this happens to a lot of people, and your reaction was murder. And so society, to protect society from somebody like that, certainly demands prison. And to be frank, in your case, rehabilitation is not a factor. I'm considering that significantly. And again, this might be a different case if you were, 25 years old. But you're 58 years old. I don't know how to say this without just sounding mean, but this is who you are.
The ability of convicted criminals to deliver convincing statements in court, even when faced with overwhelming evidence of their guilt, is a multifaceted phenomenon. It involves psychological traits, rhetorical strategies, and the dynamics of the courtroom and media. And understanding the elements is crucial for legal professionals, for psychologists, and for each of us in the public to navigate the complexities of the criminal justice system by effectively recognizing the mechanisms that are behind these persuasive declarations. Hey, welcome everybody to Profiling Evil. In this episode on these narcissistic predators who try to convince us how they are much different than the evidence in the criminal case has pointed and said they are. In this case, we're talking about Daniel Howard, that former retired police officer up in Idaho, a former Marine who is convicted now of murdering his wife. This is a case of a wolf who keeps trying to look like he's wearing sheep's clothing. Hey, please hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell so that you're getting all of our videos just like this one. Now listen, you're not going to want to miss the entire ruling by the court at the end of this video. So I'm hoping you'll stick around for the entire thing. Most importantly, I hope you'll be weighing in with your comments down below and sharing what you think happened in this case, what the motivation was, and how this guy tried to get away with murder. As we get started, I want to start with listening to Daniel Howard's plea to the court as he tried to convince this judge that he's not the monster that he's been proven to be. Now, before we do this, I thought I'd talk about the phenomenon that comes with these convicted criminals, and especially this moment in time when they deliver these compelling statements in court, even when there's overwhelming evidence that indicates their guilt. When these guys get up, including Daniel Howard, who you're going to watch in just a moment, the statement they give is often poignant, and it can kind of invoke some sympathy and doubt. It challenges the perceptions that we all have. It challenges the perceptions of the jury who's already made a decision. And the hope is that it will challenge the perception of the judge who's got to make a decision and a sentence. So let's look quickly at the psychological, the rhetorical, and the strategic aspects that these convicted criminals use to present convincing narratives that they didn't do it, despite irrefutable evidence that says they did. I want to start off by talking about cognitive dissonance. We've talked about this a little bit before, but it's a psychological theory that was proposed by Dr. Leon Festinger. It suggests that individuals experience discomfort when they have two conflicting beliefs, the belief and the knowledge that they did something and what they want to look like. They alleviate discomfort and rationalize or justify their actions. In effect, they create a narrative that aligns with their self-perception. In this case, maybe I didn't do this. Now, convicted criminals may genuinely believe in their own innocence or their justification of their actions. This allows them to present their case pretty dang convincingly. I don't know if Howard felt this way, but it might be the only way that he could mentally handle what's now happening to him. That's this responsibility that he's having to take for his actions. Now, many predators who commit severe crimes exhibit really narcissistic personality traits characterized by grandiosity, a lack of empathy, or a need for admiration. Can you imagine? Now remember this guy's comments about what a great, nurturing, caring person that he was, how he served the community. These traits can enable criminals to convincingly portray themselves as victims of this thing, misunderstood individuals. In their hope and their goal is simply to manipulate their audience emotions and perceptions. In this case, the judge. Maybe all of us, who knows? Now, psychopathy is another factor that contributes to this persuasive capability that some criminals have. Psychopaths are often adept at mimicking emotion and manipulating others. Their lack of genuine empathy, though, allows them to fabricate these wild stories and express emotions convincingly, making their statements appear sincere. And as you listen to him, you might find yourself hitting points where you say, and then you're brought back to the reality of what the evidence has proved in the case, that he murdered his wife. Now, one of the most effective rhetorical strategies employed by convicted criminals is the use of this pathos, or this emotional appeal. By sharing personal anecdotes, expressing remorse, or appealing to the values and emotions of their audience. In this case, in the true crime community, each of us, or in the case of the court, the judge, they can evoke sympathy and compassion. Now, this emotional connection could overshadow the logical assessment of evidence. We love to forgive people, and they're taking advantage of this. Now, convicted criminals may attempt to establish this ethos or credibility by highlighting aspects of their character, highlighting past behaviors. Look what a good guy I was back then. I was a cop. I saved the world. Or their circumstances that might portray him in some kind of a positive light. Now, they might emphasize their role as a loving parent. This is what this guy tried to do. A dedicated worker, a person who's made significant contributions to the community, thereby deserving of a trustworthy image. And we saw this happening in what he does here, and you'll witness this in just a moment. But despite the overwhelming evidence against them, some criminals can construct logical arguments that explain their actions or cast doubt on the prosecution's case. They may point to inconsistencies, they suggest alternative scenarios, or they might question the motive of witnesses. By presenting these seemingly rational cases, they create this semblance of doubt. So let's watch his statement as he gives it to the judge, and I want you to weigh each of these things as we go through this. I'd like to see you make some comments down below while you're watching this, and I'll be looking over those and reading them, and I hope each of you will be doing the same. Let's watch.
Your Honor, I am excuse me for a second. I'm not that monster, I assure you, that people have portrayed me to be. Kenny and I had 28 years together and raised a family, had mostly a good marriage and a good life. I I worked away from home all the time, and I was gone, and that was probably the gist of most of our problems, that I was gone. But I'm not that animal that they portrayed me, and that monster. And I couldn't have been that monster for 28 years and not be here before the court, way before him. It is not my intention to anger the court or disrespect the process that I used to believe in and work for. But Your Honor is about to sentence an innocent man to prison. And I love my wife, and I miss her. And I love my in-laws, Jamie and Wendell, and my stepdaughter, Brooke, who I raised since an infant, and her daughter, Kinley, that I helped raise for 5 years when we took them into our house. And I will miss them very much. I do miss them. Words cannot describe the pain that I feel for that. I stand before you, a shell of a man I used to be. Hell, I don't even have a shell left. My wife took her life. My will to live went down significantly. And when the jury found me guilty of crimes I didn't commit, it went down even further. And Mr. Johnson touched on this. I appreciate the court taking into consideration my service to the country as a Marine with an honorable discharge, to the state of Idaho for over 20 years, in which I was decorated multiple times for saving lives, not taking them. For service to the community through coaching football and baseball for many years, and being a 4-H leader for many years. We provided 1,000 animals to kids in this community to take to the fair and show. We were very involved. I volunteered to help the seniors in the community north of me. Every time there was a windstorm, I'd cut trees from the driveway, from around the house. I volunteered a lot. And to the frustration of my wife sometimes, because I was gone even more away from home. I didn't ask those people to write letters into the court because I didn't want to burden them. So that's why I'm telling you that now. I have successfully completed probation before, like Mr. Johnson has said, and I can successfully complete probation and parole in the future, I assure you. I just want to reiterate that I still love Kennedy's side of the family, Janie, Wendell, Brian. I still love my stepdaughter. I miss them very much. I love my side of the family, my son Wyatt, my dad John, my sister Diane. I will miss them very much. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Hey everybody, look who I'm hanging out with. And listen, I'm not attending choir practice, but I just wanted to tell you that you need to be watching Profiling Evil YouTube. Don't miss it. I'm telling you, there's something there for you every single time. I never miss. You shouldn't either.
Well, to recap this case, Daniel Howard is convicted of killing his wife, Kennedy Howard, back in 2021. Now, you might want to go back and watch my previous video on this thing and my predictions on the outcome of the case. You can find a link down below or just go to the playlist and grab that thing. But here's the case in a nutshell. Daniel Howard murdered his wife, Candy, because she was planning to leave him for another man. He didn't want to split the roughly $2 million in shared assets that the couple had amassed over the course of their marriage. In fact, things were kind of bad in the marriage, and there was past history of abuses. On one occasion, Kendi Howard actually told her parents that she woke up. This was 3 days before she was murdered, and she found her husband Daniel standing over her, dressed in black. She was absolutely convinced at that moment that he was going to kill her. Well, she immediately left the home, went to her parents, and spent a few days, but she returned home when Howard promised her that he loved her and that he wouldn't harm her. This brings up that reminder of that domestic violence cycle and the domestic violence homicides that occur as a result of people going back thinking it might get better. And my experience is it never gets better. Well, anyway, he made the promises, but apparently that wasn't the case because this autopsy on her proved that this poor woman was covered with bruises across her body. She had shallow cuts on her feet. She had second-degree burns and a broken jaw. And then, of course, the killer put her in a carotid restraint that cut off the blood flow to her brain, and then he suffocated her. This is a cut and dried murder, and he's been convicted of this murder. And even after she was dead, in order to stage the scene, he placed her in their bathtub and he filled it with water. He pulled her hair back with a clip, but some strands escaped and fell across her face, which really caused him problems in the trial. He put her phone and her purse by the sink, and then, to capstone this staging that he was putting in place, he put a gun in Kendi's mouth and he pulled the trigger. Now, it was the forensics and the downward bullet trajectory that actually revealed that she couldn't have done this herself. And I think that was the nail in his convicted coffin. Well, past behavior is predictive of future behavior. We've said that a dozen times on this channel. And Daniel Howard's past came back to haunt him as prosecutors shared an event where Howard actually threatened to kill another guy. This was about 10 years earlier, and the other guy was having an affair, allegedly, with his wife. Now, Daniel Howard was accused of stalking the man, stealing his mail, pouring syrup into his vehicles, and in firing a gun at his house. Now, in information that either came out in court or during the pre-sentence report, Daniel Howard also reportedly told investigators that the other man lived only because he allowed it. He said he understood why some men kill their wives. Well, the jury convicted the guy of murdering his wife, and the judge, he listened politely to the killer's statement before he reminded him that he had committed a heinous, outrageous murder. He reminded Howard that not only did he kill his wife, but he also killed a loving mother to her children, a grandmother, a sister, a daughter, and a friend to others. Now let's end with the judge's ruling that sent Daniel Howard to prison for the rest of this guy's life. Listen in.
Well, I want to start by addressing why we're here. We're here for sentencing on a conviction of second-degree murder and a conviction of domestic violence, a felony. And what the jury found, Mr. Howard, is that you murdered your wife. Now, why they why they found it a second-degree murder versus first-degree was, I mean, I'm not there in the jury room, but they didn't find beyond a reasonable doubt the one element of premeditation. But there's no doubt that they found they found specifically, it was part of the charging documents and part of the jury instructions, that you asphyxiated your wife, that you strangled her, that you killed your wife. And so the state has argued a lot about, we don't know exactly what happened that night, how she obtained the bruising, the burn, the broken jaw, and your attorney disputes the state's version of how she got those injuries. We don't know for sure. But what we know, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her naked body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And, often in horrible crimes like this, everybody wants to know why. And often we don't know why. And I can't get inside your brain, but the pretty clear evidence, I agree with the state, is that this was due to, jealousy, greed, pride, anger, revenge, some combination of that. And because of that, you killed your wife. And you killed her in a brutal manner. And as I think about it, when you killed your wife, when you killed Kendi, you didn't just kill your wife. You killed a mother, you killed a grandmother, you killed a sister, you killed a daughter, you killed a coworker, you killed somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. This is without the state proving necessarily, and they don't have to, without them proving exactly how she received what they describe as this beating, without them proving exactly how she ended up with a body so badly bruised, with a broken jaw, with a burned arm. Set that stuff aside. We know you strangled your wife, you killed her, and you staged her to look like a suicide. We don't have to know the answers to all those other things to understand this was a heinous, outrageous murder. And from my view of the evidence and from what came out, despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly at all, because we don't like to think that anybody would be like that. But you're not sorry, and I don't. The way you treated her family, the way you treated your own family, your own stepdaughter, your granddaughter, with a cold and callous contempt after the murder, it belies your argument to me today that you love these people and that you're sorry. As Brooke indicated, you never even talked to her about this after the fact. Your behavior towards her was contemptuous and unkind. And I'm not sentencing you for that. There was a lot of stuff that came in at the trial as to how you treated people after the fact, and how you treated your stepdaughter after the fact, and not allowing your granddaughter to get items that were meaningful and significant. But that's not why you're being sentenced today. I'm just that, but that does point to the remorse, the lack of remorse, the lack of caring, and just the callous disregard that you had for Kendi and how her death affected those around her. I'm always guided in sentencing by the Toohill factors, State versus Toohill, as well as, and those factors are codified in Idaho Code 1925-21. The goals of sentencing include the primary consideration of the protection of society, followed by the possibility of risk reduction through rehabilitation, deterrence of the individual and the public generally, and punishment or retribution for wrongdoing and the impact on the victim. And so I want to talk about those briefly. In terms of protection of society, I mean, obviously society has to be protected from somebody who's willing to commit the ultimate crime of murder. If, I was just say, if they feel threatened, you didn't even feel threatened. This is over, again, most likely, elements of greed and anger and revenge. Someone who responds to, you know, I understand your wife was leaving you after many years of marriage. Your wife had engaged in a relationship with another man, and you were getting divorced. And I don't pretend that would be easy to go through. But this happens to a lot of people, and your reaction was murder. And so society, to protect society from somebody like that, certainly demands prison. I look at the possibility of risk reduction through rehabilitation. And to be frank, in your case, rehabilitation is not a factor. I'm considering that significantly. And again, this might be a different case if you were, 25 years old. But you're 58 years old, and I don't know how to say this without just sounding mean, but I mean, this is who you are. When I read the PSIs, I read that, and these are, obviously the PSI included a lot of reports. But these are actual quotes you gave to law enforcement 10 years ago. I read the PSI, and when I'm thinking about rehabilitation, when I was reading these, a couple things jumped out at me. This is, and I'm reading from page 79 of the PSI, the first one I got, page 79 of 162. When this is your neighbor who you were angry with. Now this is him. I said these were quotes from you. This isn't a quote from you. This is what he says you told him. Wood claimed Daniel Howard yelled at him, "I don't know where you are at, but I'm going to find you and kill you, you fucker. You fucked up my life. When you least expect it, I will find you." And then when confronted about this, among a number of things you said, this is a text you sent to another individual. Quote, "I used incredible restraint because the weasel fuck is still breathing." So this is 10 years ago. You're talking about somebody is still alive because you used incredible restraint. During the interview, you were asked if you had threatened to splatter Mr. Wood's brains across the wall, You denied the statement and said the following, quote, "I don't know how many people I told that he's lucky that basically he's breathing because I choose to let him to. Dumb, I mean, I never threatened to kill him." But you were telling people he's breathing because you choose to let him to. You went on to say, and then this really jumped out at me because this is 10 years before you murder your wife. You say, "He's damn lucky I'm a fucking stable guy," or I could just imagine myself. I look back at these guys and I'm thinking, you know these guys that get put in prison because they killed their old ladies who they were fucking around with? I'm like, you know what? Man, I understand a certain amount why now. Those thoughts going through my mind, yeah, it's not illegal to think that, let me tell you something. And so 10 years before, you're saying you understand guys killing their wives. And then 10 years later, you do it. Or in the neighborhood of 10 years. So that was page 29 of 162. This is on page 95 of 162. And this is the sergeant's comments as part of this interview with you about your behavior, the stalking behavior that they were investigating of your neighbor. It says, "During this long pause, Daniel Howard attempted to look disgusted and in emotional pain, but appeared feigned, and he would abruptly recover to continue his interview." Interestingly, I read in the PSI writer experienced this as well. On page 18, it says, "Numerous times during his interview, he appeared to be feigning emotions of sadness, but he would quickly change his demeanor and direct the conversation back to himself." And it's like, wow, this is what we saw at trial. This is what let me back up. I don't mean literally in the trial, although that was certainly, I think there were times you tried to create emotions and were feigning them, but whatever. Your attorneys indicated that part of your disinterest was a trial strategy. So I'm not putting a lot of stock in that. But we saw at trial your efforts the night that you murdered your wife to feign this sadness and these emotions. And it was pretty obvious to see through. But what jumped out at me is seeing that you did this 10 years ago. And that you had these same thoughts. You were talking about allowing people to live through your own self-control and restraint, understanding why people would kill their, quote, old ladies and go to prison. And so you're 58 years old. I don't see a lot of rehabilitation, sadly, in your future. Maybe, perhaps, but that's not a significant mitigating factor in sentencing you. Deterrence of the individual and the public generally, certainly I consider deterrence. People need to know. And usually, we talk about specific deterrence, that's deterring the person who's in front of me. And then we talk about general deterrence, which is deterring, the community as a whole and the public as a whole. And I almost rarely talk about deterring the public as a whole, because usually people don't pay attention to what's happening on a day-to-day basis here in court. But in your situation, people are. And the public needs to know that there is a severe punishment for murdering your wife. And there's no sort of mitigation because the marriage is on the rocks or the wife was unfaithful or things like that. There's absolutely no justification here for murdering your wife. And I think it's important that the sentence sends that message as well. And then finally, punishment or retribution for wrongdoing and the impact on the victim. As has been noted by our courts, a judge really only has complete information when it comes to retribution and deterrence, because those are based on the nature of the offense. I can't otherwise get inside your head. And there's a lot that went on in this case that we don't know. We don't know how, Kendi got the injuries on her feet, on her head, all over her body. There's a lot of those things we don't know. But what I know beyond a reasonable doubt is that you strangled or asphyxiated your wife. You murdered her. You staged her body to be found as if it were suicide. It's an outrageously egregious murder. And of course, all murder is, but this is particularly heinous in my view, having sat through the trial and seen all the evidence. Sometimes the nature and gravity of the offense standing alone is sufficient to justify a fixed life sentence. And that is what I'm going to impose here. I think Kendi's family deserves to have that closure. The crime is so egregious that I don't think you should be released at any point in the future. And I don't impose that lightly. I have thought long and hard about this, considered all the evidence, considered aggravation and mitigation. There's just so little mitigation here. There's just really none. And so I do find that a fixed life sentence is appropriate for the count of murder in the second degree. On the domestic violence charge, I'll impose 10-year sentence and run it concurrent. I didn't even speak about that. I mean, really, I'm not, I don't mean to give that charge short shrift. The jury found that you were violent and abusive to your wife as well. It's just that, frankly, the killing alone subsumes it all in my view. And so I'm running that, the domestic violence charge of 10 years will run concurrent with your life sentence. The final thing I want to say, Mr. Howard, is that usually when I sentence people, I try to give some element of hope or encouragement to change for the future, because we want to see that in people. And I'll simply say that nobody, as long as they're alive, is beyond redemption. Nobody is beyond the capability of changing, and so you're not beyond redemption. But in this case, that will have to happen within the walls of a prison. And I would hope for that for you. But given the egregious crime you committed, this heinous murder, I do find that fixed life is the appropriate sentence. So that will be the order of the court.
Well, as this thing came to a close, it's important for us to remember that it was jealousy and greed that motivated Howard to kill his wife, and then to stage her death as a suicide. The judge hammered him when he said, "Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotionally sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer." And with that, Daniel Howard was sent away to prison for the rest of his life. Kendi Howard's family remains haunted with these thoughts of what they might have done to protect her. Folks, You can't dwell on the what I could have done's. Her daughter said, quote, I struggle with guilt and I struggle with not knowing. I wish I could have convinced her, speaking of her mother, to stay with me instead of going home that night. The fear in her voice and the fear on her face when she told me how she woke up with him standing over her will never leave me, close quote. She continued by stating that nothing is going to fix the hole that was left behind with her murder. Nothing can fix or undo what's been done. But she did say that the thought that he can no longer control her name, her memory, and her spirit gives her a sense of peace. You know, the ability of these convicted criminals to deliver convincing statements in court, even when they're faced with overwhelming evidence of their guilt, is a multifaceted phenomenon. It involves psychological traits, rhetorical strategies, and the dynamics of the courtroom and the media. For each of us, and really for the legal profession and the judges, understanding these elements is crucial. It's crucial to navigate the complexities of the criminal justice system effectively by recognizing that these mechanisms behind these persuasive declarations exist. When we recognize it, we can better appreciate the challenges faced by the judicial system in ensuring justice for victims and their families. Hey, I'd like to know your thoughts on this one, folks, and I hope you're going to enter them down below. You know, I'm sharing this because we're waiting for verdicts in a couple of other big cases right now. Ali Abulaban, that murder case where he murdered his wife. We're going to be waiting for that one to come out, and we're going to hear him get up in front of a judge and utter that same convincing argument. And then, of course, Chad Daybell's triple murder trial up in Idaho. Buckle up, folks, because I think we're going to see similar kinds of statements when those two face the court, especially if they're facing the court and they're looking at life sentences or, in Chad Daybell's case, the death penalty. Hey, remember that you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And please check out our audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. I'm heading out the door to CrimeCon this week, and I'm going to be looking forward to meeting all of you who will be joining me in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.